love summer, especially after the winter that we had. That winter was just diabolical. I mean, the temperatures, the snow. I mean, right away, winter's not my favorite season anyway, but it was extra this winter, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm glad it wasn't just me. I like spring, the new flowers coming out. I like fall when the leaves change. But I do have a special place in my heart for summer. I do. Summer is that time of year where, hopefully, if it's not rainy weekends, the weather's warmer. It's that time of year where we get to take vacations, maybe go on some trips. And there's a slew of holidays in the summer, from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So most recently, we celebrated Juneteenth on June 19th, and of course, Independence Day on July 4th. I was lucky enough to be keynote speaker for the Essex County Board of County Commissioners, that's a mouthful, at their Juneteenth celebration. That was a nice honor. And of course, it was the 250th anniversary of the United States, marking 2.5 centuries since the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. That's the document that says in writing that all people are created equal. That one. And even though summer is my favorite, absolute favorite season, I've got to admit, I'm pretty tired of this nation celebrating freedom, as if they know what it really is. I was lucky enough to be raised knowing about Juneteenth, and just for giggles and laughs, I'm gonna take us through a real quick history, just to level set the room so we know all what we're talking about. Not everyone was raised knowing what Juneteenth was, and that's okay. It wasn't always taught. We're catching us up to speed, right? So a lot of people got kind of happy and was like, oh great, Lincoln freed the slaves. But it was really more of a political move than a tug at his heartstrings. Lincoln wrote, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." Okay, indifference. 1862 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was written, but a lot of people don't know it only freed the Confederate state slaves, not the Union. Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Delaware, Kentucky, Missouri, etc. were Union states. In fact, New Jersey was legally classified as a free state, but they had this thing called Apprentices for Life. It was their loophole to get around the word slavery, but still keep you enslaved. Fun times. So no freedom for the Union states, just for the Confederate states, in case you didn't know. In 1865, almost 3 years later, that's when the 250,000 people in Texas were still enslaved. And the military came to town and was like, no, y'all supposed to have been freed these people. Now, you gotta remember that enslaved people, you know, we couldn't read, they couldn't write for the most part, because it was illegal to teach black people to read or write. It wasn't like there was some newspaper they could have seen the title to, or a TV show where they had just breaking information, or even a radio, right? This was back when most of their lives were on the plantation. They didn't really get off that much. Some slaves got to go to town here or there just to kind of hear what was going on in the news and bring it back. But for the most part, slaves were on that plantation, and that was that. So the Texans found out almost 3 years later that they were actually free. And that's where Juneteenth comes from. Texas lying by omission to get 3 more years of labor, free labor, out of their slaves. That never felt like a celebration to me. Like, oh, we found out y'all was lying, okay. But I understand why Texas noted that date and why it was so important to them. By the way, New Jersey was the last northern state to approve and ratify the 13th Amendment months after it had already become part of the U.S. Constitution, so shade on New Jersey. So once the slaves were freed, what did freedom look like? Imagine you can't read or write. You only know how to do the 1 or 2 things you were trained to do. You might own a pair of shoes, a dress or 2, but maybe not. You probably dressed in rags. You might have been barefoot, and you probably didn't have any education. Where were you going? What were you going to do for work, housing, income, transportation? It's not like you owned the mules and the horses. Everything in your life was owned by the master. You had absolutely nothing. Even the clothes on your back came from the plantation. Don't get me wrong, of course people were happy to be free. They just didn't know what to do with it. Freedom didn't look like opportunity and upward mobility then. Not just yet. Some left the plantation, but many stayed behind and entered sharecropping, which was like 1 click away from slavery. Terrible. Lesson for another day. Later that same year, in 1865, slavery was officially abolished for everyone, North and South, by the 13th Amendment, but it had a catch. Enslavement labor is okay as punishment for a crime. This is key. At that time, it led to things like black codes. Black codes were rules that different states had, and they were crazy rules. And really, I'm gonna boil it down for you. They were just meant to try to get people enslaved so they could be what? Free labor. Because the loophole said so. If you were in jail, you could work for me for free. I can't keep you as a slave, but if you're arrested, you can work for me for free. Everyone follow along with that? Yeah. Crappy rule, right? Some of the black codes were ridiculous. They were like this. A black person had to carry employment papers at all times, or, say it with me, they could be arrested. They could be arrested. A black person without a job was subject to be arrested. Arrested, exactly. Black folks couldn't have gatherings of more than 5 people, or they could be arrested. They couldn't gather after dark, or they would be arrested. Blacks couldn't hold jobs of skilled trades, even if they learned one on the plantation. Most of the jobs that they were allowed to do were agricultural or menial labor, meaning sharecropping on the farm, okay? Judges could decide that children of unsuitable parents were apprentices and bind them to white employers, frequently the former slave owners of their parents. They couldn't conduct church services, own property, vote, marry whites. There were heavy fines, and if you couldn't pay the fine, you were arrested. You're catching on. All right. So that loophole still plagues us today as mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, convict leasing, and prison labor. Delaney Hall comes to mind, but sermon for another day. Now listen, we have made progress in this country and in this state, but systemic change It's hard to do that when racism is poured like fertilizer into our roots, just like misogyny, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all of those learned behaviors. Everything that grows in this land that we breathe in, sleep, and eat is tainted and stained by those biases. It's like cancer-causing pollution that you can't even see anymore because you've been living with it your whole life. It's been ingrained into American culture. How deeply? Well, certainly right after slavery was abolished, the waters were a little choppy. 1892 in Tennessee, 3 black men co-owned a store called the People's Grocery. A white local competitor claimed that his business rivals were conspiring against white residents. So a mob surrounded the store, brutally murdered the 3 successful men. 1898 in North Carolina, that was the Wilmington Massacre, where heavily armed white supremacists overthrew the legitimately elected biracial city government in the only successful illegal seizure of government power in US history. The mob destroyed the city's only black-owned newspaper, burned the black businesses, and killed dozens of black residents, forcing hundreds to permanently flee. 1911, a black man and a white sheriff were killed over a stolen cow inquiry. When the black man was dead, his wife and son were arrested and held on murder charges. An armed white mob broke into the jail and hung the mother and son from a bridge. Townspeople posed for photographs near the hanging bodies. These images were subsequently reproduced as souvenir postcards and distributed around the country. 1917 was the St. Louis race riots. 1918 in Georgia, Mary Turner was brutally murdered by a white mob for denouncing the lynching of her husband, Hazel Turner, the previous day. She was 8 months pregnant. They tied her ankles together, hung her up upside down, and set her on fire. Between 1865 and 1950, there were over 6,000 black Americans who were victims of lynching. 1999 in Arkansas, 1921, Black Wall Street, where a 19-year-old youth bumped into a 20-year-old white elevator operator, and the newspaper said that he had attacked her. The local mob came, and not only did they chant outside the courthouse to lynch him, they looted and burned down Greenwood, a prosperous and affluent black neighborhood filled with black banks, black businesses, and black homeowners, resulting in 300 deaths and the destruction of 35 city blocks. No one was ever charged in the deaths or the destruction. 1923, Rosewood. 1944, George Stinley, a 14-year-old boy, is executed, the youngest ever. 1951, an NAACP organizer and his wife are killed in a bombing at their home Christmas night. 1955, Emmett Till, accused of whistling at a white woman, lynched, beaten, and brutally murdered. The 2 men were charged and acquitted by an all-white jury. Protected by double jeopardy, they gave all the gruesome details to a magazine. Later, the accuser admitted that her courtroom testimony was entirely fabricated. Does this sound like freedom to you? Well, maybe we just needed a little more time to pass, and freedom would find us. 1963, Medgar Evers is assassinated in his driveway. He was the head of the NAACP there, secretary. 1963 again, the Ku Klux Klan planted a bomb at a church, killing 4 little black girls. 1965, that was Bloody Sunday, when the peaceful march across the bridge ended in violent attacks from the police and vigilante groups. 1965, in New York City, Malcolm X was assassinated. 68, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Well, the 60s were a pivotal time. A lot was going on then. Maybe we just needed a little more grace to get to that freedom that we were promised. 1984, Eleanor Bumpurs, an elderly disabled woman who was being evicted. She didn't want to leave, so the police broke in and fatally shot her twice with a 12-gauge shotgun. 1985, in Philly, the MOVE bombing. The Philly police dropped a bomb on a residential home that housed the Black Revolutionary Organization MOVE. The bomb and ensuing fire killed 11 people, including 5 children. 1989, Yusef Hawkins. 1991, Letitia Harland. She was killed by a convenience store clerk over a $2 bottle of orange juice because they incorrectly assumed she was shoplifting. The clerk who killed her was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter but given probation and no jail time. 1997, Abner Louima. I can't even tell you the horrific abuse the cops put on Abner Louima. 1999, Amadou Diallo. He was shot and killed in his apartment stoop by 4 NYPD officers who claimed that they had mistaken him for a rape suspect from a year earlier. They fired 41 shots, striking him 19 times. He was unarmed. Ghana, girl, you talking about old stuff. Stop talking about old stuff, bringing up old stuff. That was last century. Yeah, surely freedom looks good on us now, right? 2013. Jonathan Farrell crashes his car in a rural road and he goes to a nearby house to knock for help. The homeowner called the police, who shot Jonathan 10 times when they arrived. 2014, Eric Garner was selling cigarettes. You're not supposed to do that without a permit. He didn't have one. Instead of giving him a fine, they put him in an illegal chokehold and killed him while he was saying, I can't breathe. 2015, Sandra Bland was arrested at a traffic stop on her way to an interview. Something went wrong. She got arrested, she got put in jail, and she was found hung in her cell 3 days later. They said it was suicide, but when they checked the dash cam, the officer was placed on administrative leave for failing to follow proper procedures, and then later he was fired for lying. No one ever went to jail for that. Breonna Taylor, she was killed while she was sleeping, 2020. George Floyd, that's always a good one. On his neck for 9 minutes because he passed an illegal counterfeit $20 bill, but it wasn't illegal. The $20 bill was real. We got angry. We cried out, when is this gonna stop? We said, Black Lives Matter. We demanded change. We cried out, no justice, no peace. And we held signs that said, I can't breathe. Not one reform, not one new law. 2021, Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day into law, making June 19th a federal holiday. Great. 2023, Cyrus Carmack Belton was shot in the back of a convenience store for being suspected of stealing a bottle of water. The surveillance camera showed he did not steal a bottle of water. 2025, Mercedes Wells was ignored. She was crying for help. The nurses told her, go home and wait for your labor to progress. She gave birth 8 minutes later on the side of the road in her car. 2026, Jared Jackson, 28, found dead after attending a music festival with his white friends. They said it was a suicide, but the family insisted on an investigation. This case is still pending. 2026, Tennessee, Darius Chaplin, 4 police officers attacked him, tased him, pulled out his locks, and said, "Get the dog out." They let the canine dog maul him while he was on the ground. Days later, he died in custody. The case is still pending. 2026, officers responded to a shoplifting call about diapers being stolen. They opened fire on a moving vehicle containing a toddler, his mother, and another adult. 1-year-old Cohen Wiley died. The family had a receipt for the diapers. The case is still pending. 2026, Black 18-year-old athlete Nolan Wells and his white friends went on a 4th of July trip where he was reported missing, but all 3 of his friends returned. They had his cell phone, they all deleted their social media accounts, they unfriended him on social media, they all obtained lawyers, one of their fathers is a judge, they all claimed they have no idea where he was, and they thought he was getting a ride back with someone else. This case is still pending. The freedom we have as Black people does not include safely sleeping in our beds, safely vacationing with friends, complying with police, going to a store for Skittles or water or juice, being unarmed or having our car break down on the road. How can I feel safe when my Black husband, sons, daughter, friends, associates, classmates are walking on eggshells in the free America that others thrive in? Institutional racism affects all of these stories. Whether we have a Black president or not, a Black friend at work, a TV show with Black family, a Black movie star, a Black person on the Supreme Court. Systemic racism doesn't mean every person, every judge, every cop, every teacher, every doctor you meet is racist. Of course not. It means the very ground is damaged, and every one of us is operating from that foundational instability. The education system, the prison system, food deserts, the legal system, the housing system, the job market, the medical system, redlining. Every single system is broken in the foundation. We raised our voices. We demanded better schools, fair policing, fair legal systems, equitable medical treatment, accountability from gun owners, police, judges, hoping that this capitalistic society would find human life more valuable than mere profit or property. That our lives are so much more important than a pack of diapers that you think is being stolen. I want to acknowledge the Texans who marked Juneteenth for decades, the immigrants who came to this country holding the meaning of Independence Day in their hearts, the indigenous people who have honored this land, the enslaved people who made a way out of no way. I want to acknowledge the many people who championed these holidays so our history could be recognized and remembered in these important ways. And I ain't never mad at a day off. But I want you to know, without a shadow of a doubt, until we start demanding true, substantive change for all of us and actually get it on all fronts, there is absolutely no holiday that will ever